Audio Jungle.
My name is Ginger Spickler, and I am the founder and current director of Memphis School Guide. I'm from a small town in western Kentucky. It's a town that my parents actually chose to move to because of the really strong public schools. My dad has been on the school board for going on 30 years now. So education was always a big and important part of my life growing up. And never thought that my own kids would do anything other than public schools themselves. And then I moved to Memphis. So I actually came here to go to college, went to Rhodes College, and while I was there, spent some time at local boys and girls clubs and a neighborhood Christian center doing tutoring. And it was there that I began to get concerned about the public schools in Memphis. I was, working with kids who were just clearly having some not great educational experiences. And so fast forward a few years, my husband and I have kids, and I bring home my newborn baby son from the hospital, and when he is a week old, I called the closest private school and asked if I need to be on some sort of waiting list, because I was pretty sure that public schools were not going to work for my child in Memphis. Before I had kids, I actually ended up working for a local organization called MOST, Memphis Opportunity Scholarship Trust. MOST is essentially a private voucher program, serves about 500 kids in the Memphis area, provides scholarships to them to attend private schools. And I sought out that opportunity about 15 years ago as a reaction to what I was seeing when I was tutoring those inner city kids who I felt like weren't getting a good education in the public schools. And at the time, there wasn't a lot of education reform or any education reform going on in Memphis. Things have changed a lot in those 15 years in terms of public education in Memphis, but at the time I felt like MOST was a really good way to get involved in helping kids in Memphis get a better education. And it wasn't until a friend of mine, another parent in the neighborhood, asked where we would be sending our kids, and this was before they were even 2 years old, but we were already starting to think about it. And she asked where we would be sending our kids, and there's a public school 2 blocks down the street from our house. But I had no intention of even checking it out until she suggested that we go together to do just that. So we did. We went to check out our neighborhood public school, and over the course of a couple of years, spent time getting to know the principal, visiting classrooms, actually had teachers come to our living room right here and talk to neighborhood families about what it would be like to have our kids in our neighborhood public school. So it was kind of the confluence of those 2 events that got me started thinking about option or a resource like Memphis School Guide, which didn't have a name in my head at that time, but I knew that there were lots of parents like myself, like the ones who were calling MOST every day looking for options, who just wanted the best education for their child, and if they didn't think they could get it in their local neighborhood school, maybe thought the only option was a private school. And as I was learning through my exploration of our neighborhood public school, that's not necessarily true, that there are lots of public schools, and they are all very different. So I began to come up with this idea that parents needed some place they could go to get good information about all of their options, and not just about the schools themselves, but about how to enroll. One of the things that I was finding in my own exploration and my own research of our public school options, as well as in my conversations with families who called MOST, was that figuring out what school you wanted to send your child to was just half the battle, or not even half the battle. The rest of that was actually figuring out how to get a seat in that school. The enrollment procedures are pretty complicated, and there wasn't always a lot of good information about how to do that. And so I wanted to create something that would give parents the information they needed to feel empowered to make the best decision for their children, and then to actually get their child in a seat in the school that they chose. We ended up having a conversation with a guy named Paul in St. Louis who had created a website called STL City Schools. Paul, like me, is first and foremost a parent who was frustrated with the lack of information about schools as he was searching for schools for his own kids. But he also happens to be a tech expert. He does web-based databases for a living through his company. And so he had figured out pretty easily how to create the infrastructure for a website like this. And after talking to him for about 30 minutes one day, he offered to help me in Memphis. And so I gave him a chance to sleep on that and make sure that was something that he really wanted to take on. But we ultimately ended up working together and are still working together. The final piece of making this website a reality was funding. And again, I was lucky to be working at Most, which was a place that, even though it was providing scholarships for kids to attend private schools, recognized that helping parents make the best choice about schools meant giving them good information to choose from among all of their choices, public schools included. And they were generous enough to give me some funding to get started. And so Paul and I started working together in the fall of 2014. And after a lot of work, a lot of typing, a lot of emails, we launched the first version of Memphis School Guide during the last week of January in 2015. And after that, once we kind of had a real thing, a real Memphis School Guide, it was a little bit easier to get funding and support to keep it going. I think it was one of those things where the people I had been asking for funds to support this work wanted to see if I could actually get it off the ground. And once I did, and they saw that it was actually a good and useful product, that they were more willing to support it financially on an ongoing basis. I think Memphis School Guide is an important addition to our community because really my own experience with trying to choose a school for my children, and I think I was going so much on just rumor or reputation or a few isolated experiences that I had, and wasn't really considering all of my options. And so I want to help parents know that they do have choices. If your neighborhood school is not a good fit for your family, and it may not always be, there are lots of options out there. Every public school, just because they're a public school, is not the same. Each school has different leaders and different teaching staffs, they might have a different area of focus, like STEM or the arts or something like that, that might be a better fit for their child. But for a parent who doesn't know about those options, they are closing off a lot of potential choices for their children. And so, my hope is that Memphis School Guide helps parents become aware of all the options that they have really available to them. I think my advice to another parent who was thinking about taking on a project like this in their own community would be to just think about what is it you're passionate about? What is it that you can't stop thinking about? In my case, it was 3 or 4 years of thinking that somebody needed to create this resource, and finally realizing that somebody might be me. I would say that I tapped into my own strengths. I'm a bit of an information junkie, but I'm also a person who likes to connect people, with resources, and so Memphis School Guide ended up being a pretty perfect project for me. It enabled me to link my passion for information and how I like to help people find resources that are useful to them. So I would just say to follow your passion. There really are a lot of ways that you can be involved in your kids' education. I have friends who are really great at going to school board meetings and giving a passionate 2-minute pitch about some issue that they are advocating for. I have other parents who do an awesome job at raising money for our local public school. I have always said I am not a fundraiser. I don't even do very well with the cookie sales that they come home with. But there are other ways that I contribute to my own kids' school. I'm a big reader, and so I've gotten very involved in the accelerated reader program at our local elementary school. So I think it's just finding what it is that you're good at and what interests you, and that you're willing to follow through on. There is no shortage of things that can be done in our local public schools, but it doesn't mean you have to do it all. I think the key thing is to find the thing that you're most interested in and just dive in.